just as I go live, my cat decides to start running around the house wanting to play. All right, so yeah, quantum entanglement. I honestly don't really know where to start with this topic because it's such a diverse and expansive topic to talk about, and there are of course many nuances to to actually the the information of quantum entanglement and and just the correlation between the energetic variations in our space-time fabric, and yeah, it's really very, very interesting. So I've made some notes of points to keep it relative to the work that I'm doing, because ultimately this is all about Akashic record and helping people to liberate themselves from attachments and things, removing cords to timelines and other time vectors, and obviously removing cords to other souls, to people from this life, people from past lives. So yeah, it really is such an expansive topic, so I will try and keep it as short and sweet as possible. So thanks to everyone who's joining live. I can see that there are a couple of people watching on the live, and of course to everybody who's watching on the replay. Yeah, welcome and thanks for watching, whatever time it is where you are and wherever you are in the world. So all right, so I will jump in. If anybody has got any questions based on what I'm going to share, or if you've got any questions about the relativity to quantum entanglement and what you may be experiencing, or what your perspective is, then please feel free to drop a comment below this video, and share, expand, and yeah, ask any questions that you might have. So we all know, or most of us are aware of the fact that quantum physics has finally caught up with a lot of the metaphysical kind of spiritual concepts, and has been recognizing that that souls, that we have a soul, that chakras exist, that chakras are in existence, aura is real, and all these things that that we've been talking about for decades, centuries, millennia even, and of course now we're talking about quantum entanglement, that quantum physics recognizes that two particles can affect each other and influence each other's energetic state regardless of which time vector these particles are in. So that can correlate, of course, to our experiences that we have with other souls in other lifetimes. What I find a lot in the work that I do is, when I'm looking into past life issues that issues that people have that are affecting them now in their current lifetime, there's always past life entanglements, and these entanglements can be with specific experiences, trauma stories, for example, and they can also be with other souls from other lifetimes. So quantum entanglements that we create, that we facilitate, that we instigate, they tend to be entanglements that we have had with loved ones. We tend not to get entangled with people that we don't know. We tend to have entanglements with loved ones, so parents, siblings, children, grandparents, lovers, etc. So quantum entanglements can be, we can have both positive and negative. There's polarity in everything, right? So we can have positive and negative entanglements. Positive entanglements are basically attunements and connections, beautiful connections that we have with our loved ones, whether it's, you know, our family, or whether it's, you know, with in our relationships, intimate relationships. But ultimately, you know, there can be positive, very loving exchanges and entanglements that we have, where we are constantly receiving energy. We're energized by the entanglement, even long after we have moved on, or the other person has moved on. It could be, you know, from our parents who are still in, you know, who are still with us, or parents that have departed, and we could still have these beautiful entanglements, although we don't necessarily refer to them as entanglements as such. A lot of people recognize, when we're looking at in the perspective of this work, that most people feel of quantum entanglements as being negative, but they're not. We can have beautiful entanglements with really positive entanglements that are energizing and loving, and they're constantly feeding us, they're nourishing our soul, they're nourishing our energy. These entanglements, positive entanglements, are supporting us mentally, they're supporting us emotionally, spiritually and physically. So we can have, you know, of course we can have these, you know, these beautiful positive entanglements. We can, of course, have, you know, negative entanglements, whereby these negative entanglements, they could have started out as positive, again with our loved ones, parents, family, children, siblings, lovers. They can have started out as positive attachments, positive engagements, positive attunements, but then through experience and through moving on, they can end up being quite toxic. And ultimately, this could be a mutual toxicity between, for example, you know, where there's been a disagreement, a conflict in a relationship, and the energy has become toxic, and the entanglement is toxic, and the energy that's flowing between the individuals is just it's like a freeway toxicity. So there's toxic energy, toxic thoughts, toxic feelings. It can also be one way, where there is just one individual is kind of sending negative energy to the other individual. And of course, as quantum physics recognizes how particles can affect a particle, the energy of a particle can affect the energy of another particle. So this is basically the same, because we are literally made up of hundreds of thousands of particles and atoms and electrons. So ultimately, as we're all aware, you know, energy affects energy, energy influences energy. So we can absolutely be influenced by somebody sending or directing, intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously, that people can be sending, you know, negative energy towards us. You know, whether somebody's sending us on a positive entanglement where our loved one is sending us waves of love, high vibrational energy. On the flip side of that, a negative entanglement can be where somebody is sending, again, intentionally or unintentionally, waves of anger, or we could just be receiving grief or loss. You know, somebody could be really affected by, you know, a relationship that's moved on, for example. You know, a previous lover could be really feeling this sense of loss that we have moved on, or we could actually be feeling, you know, that we could be feeling that grief and that loss, and not really understanding that where this energy is coming from. We might not be aware that it's coming from a previous relationship, but we're feeling these waves of love. But we can also, those of us who are empathic, I mean, we're all empaths, but some of us are super empaths. Those of us who are more empathic can actually be aware of, you know, be aware of the other person, the other party being deeply affected by, you know, by this entanglement. So, yeah, ultimately, it's really important to recognize and nurture and nourish positive entanglements when we have these beautiful positive entanglements, and to cut cords when there are negative entanglements. You know, it's really imperative that we have to let go of these these negative entanglements. So whether or not it's a past life entanglement from another time vector, or whether it is an entanglement that we've had with another from this lifetime, it could be a recent entanglement, it could be something that we've had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's imperative to kind of have an understanding, a deeper understanding of how this energy works and how these deep connections can transcend time and space, particularly when we feel like we've moved on from, or we've released all our cords to our previous relationships. We've cut the cord, we have perhaps mother wounds, father wounds that create entanglements that keep part of our energy attached to portions of their energy, or portions of their energy attached to portions of our energy, that all influences and impacts and affects our daily interactions and how we're engaging, with the world at large. So it's really, really important that we recognize when we have these, when we have any conflicts, that we can resolve the conflict so that we're not creating any toxicity in our environment. And by our environment, I mean our energetic environment. We don't want that toxic energy lingering in our auric field. We don't want to be holding, in specific energy centers, because ultimately these entanglements tend to attach to specific energy centers. They can be hooked into our aura. We could receive psychic attacks from these entanglements. And of course we can be, they can be hooked into specific energy centers as well, which, as we all know, each energy center is relative to a specific mental or emotional aspect. So obviously we can be influenced by these. And these entanglements can manipulate our thoughts, manipulate our energy, manipulate our emotions. They can aggravate, the negative or toxic entanglements that we have can magnify our own emotions and our own thoughts. So it's really imperative that, that we have this awareness of the entanglements that we're creating, and ultimately release them. So we can create entanglements through the contracts that we have, when we come into this lifetime or any lifetime, that we can create an entanglement with another by creating a contract. And we can create a contract by making agreements, having vows with others, making promises, oaths, as marriage oaths, marriage promises. We can create these contracts in ritualistic environments through, in having entanglements with collectives and groups, not just personal, with personal, in our personal relationship. We can become entangled with collectives or groups, specifically through like fraternities, or specific organizations, being part of women's circles, men's circles, any kind of group or organization where we're actually creating like ritualistic energy. We're creating a contract or agreement. We're literally binding portions of our soul. We can be creating these entanglements, again, consciously or unconsciously, and ultimately creating these agreements with groups or collectives. And all it takes is for one person in the group or the collective to be affected, or their energy to be corrupted, or their energy to be intruded upon, or whether they're impacted by entities or other attachments, that can literally affect the energetic dynamic within the whole group that we're entangled with. So it's really imperative to be aware of the entanglements that you can be creating. Again, quite often we're not really consciously, I've done it myself, being part of teacher trainings and being part of women's circles, and I can't even think offhand the number of kind of groups that I've joined where we've literally been doing rituals together, and as I said, just use, you know, the power of our words, that we casting spells and creating entanglements and contracts with each other, and not really having that understanding of it until years later we find ourselves being depleted, and then we start doing the work, or specifically work like this where we're going on a deeper level and we're actually looking into people's past, and if they have been part of any groups or organisations that are affecting them on a negative level. And ultimately, you know, when we have these entanglements open, they can open portals and gateways. So like if we have an entanglement in another lifetime with, let's say, a past life parent or a lover, for example, there's an unresolved issue or trauma that we've had with this, with our loved one in another lifetime, that has created toxicity in our current lifetime because it's an unresolved issue. What we're doing, especially when it's in another time vector, we're keeping portals open, portals and gateways open to these time vectors, and ultimately these portals can create other issues. You know, we can then create symptomatic issues as a result of the entanglement. So it's not just that we need to release the entanglement to release the energy that is affecting us, and there can be multiple emotions and multiple feelings at play within any one entanglement, but also the portal that we have, the gateway that we have open to this time vector, because when there's a negative portalway open, then it can leave our field open for other entities to jump into. And when I talk about entities, it doesn't mean negative spirits. It's not always negative spirits. Of course, entities are, you know, I'm going to talk about entities I'll do a discourse on entities in the new year as well. But we can ultimately have, sorry, I had to just throw a little book at my cat because he was just about to attack my cat, sorry about that. It was a soft book, but it was just a little bit of so I didn't have to get up from my chair. Yeah, we can ultimately have, you know, we can just be picking up, we leave ourselves susceptible to picking up collective entities, thought entities, energetic entities, not just malevolent energies, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's really important that we work on, you know, cutting cords, because ultimately it is a cord. You know, we're all healers, we're all familiar with cutting cords, but quite often we don't understand the gravity and the science behind this. But let me just check my notes. Okay. Yeah, so when we're creating these entangled energies with other souls, and ultimately these can all carry lessons and emotions. They all carry unresolved issues. Ultimately, there's some level of resolution that needs to happen for the entanglement to be cut. We can just cut an entanglement and it will just be, that will be it, it will be cut. But there can be some that need deeper work because there are issues to resolve, and whether that's an issue from your side, whether it's the issue from the other party's side, whether it's an issue between, you know, sometimes it's just talking something out to resolve something, but other times sometimes there has to be self-forgiveness, sometimes there has to be a forgiveness of the other soul. Sometimes there just has to be an innate understanding and acknowledgement of what happened, the experience that you had, and just the innate lesson that we can learn from these entanglements. Sometimes it needs to resolve a conflict. It could be something that's affecting the whole family unit. It could be something that's affecting the whole collective. If it's part of a group collective that you have an entanglement with, it could be you that's affecting the other party. It could be you that's affecting the other group. So ultimately, it's, you know, there's so many nuances to to quantum entanglements, but ultimately it creates a web of influence and a web of energy, a web of consciousness that really can, you know, impact on so many levels. And of course, it's not just, we're not just talking about from a metaphysical perspective, but also, you know, on a physical level. You know, these entanglements can really affect us deeply on a physical level. They can drain our energy. You know, if we have an entanglement with somebody that is constantly sending us negative energy, or we are sending them negative energy, again, it can be consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally. You know, this is draining. You know, it takes a lot of our energy to direct, you know, negative energy to others. But if we have, you know, if we do have anger issues and we're angry at somebody, it takes a lot of our energy to be angry, and this can be really depleting, and the other party will feel that, and vice versa. Just as somebody that might be angry with us, somebody that may perceive that we have betrayed them, for example, somebody that might perceive that we have abandoned them, or vice versa. You know, these kind of energies, they literally take a lot of energy from us. So when we can recognize that we are all, you know, interconnected. I know, you know, they talk about how everything is connected, and this, I think this is a lot, quite often where this information has come from, that we are all interconnected, because quantum physics has recognized that how particles impact and influence each other, again, whether they're miles apart. And there was a lady, I was just reading a couple of weeks ago about this female doctor who she was doing experiments on water. I'll see if I can find it. I did share it on my Facebook, but I'll see if I can find the link and tag it underneath, because it's super interesting how she was doing experiments on water, on her blood, sorry. And she literally took blood samples and separated them, and she would, just like Dr. Emoto did with water, she did it with her blood, but she was directing positive energy to a blood sample and negative energy to another blood sample. And then she took another blood sample and she took it away, and it was, I don't know how far away from her it was, whether it was in another town or another building, I'm not sure, I can't remember what the actual specifics were, but it was away from her. She wasn't literally with a blood sample in front of her directing negative energy. She was sending negative energy. She had two samples that were away from her, and she was sending positive and negative energy to these two samples that were in another space, and the blood was changing just from her sending, her blood was changing just from sending her this energy towards these samples. So it was really fascinating to read this article. There's a lot more to it than that as well. She was doing other experiments, but it was really interesting how she was literally, you know, experimenting on her blood and watching under a microscope how her blood was changing. It was with the blood cells. Obviously, we know our white and red blood cells are working, you know, the white cells working for our immune system. And so it was really interesting how she was looking how the blood cells were clumping together when they were stressed, causing coagulation, and how they were like expanding and opening and expressive and all freely flowing through, and when she was sending positive energy. It was really interesting. So ultimately, you know, like coming back to, you know, what we're talking about with particles, and how we can influence them, whether they're next to us or in another time vector, in another space-time, as I said, past life, that we can ultimately affect other energies as other energies can affect us. So we can strengthen our bonds with others, even when we're not with people, you know, that we can literally strengthen bonds across lifetimes. A lot of the work that I'm doing, especially when I'm doing ancestral work and we're doing ancestral healing, that we're literally healing, you know, healing our ancestors, healing our bloodlines, whether it's our living parents, our departed family members, that we are healing them. So you know, people who think this work is all spiritual woo-woo, you know, when I have multiple people saying, oh, Akashic Records, it's just spiritual woo-woo, it truly is not. It's completely fascinating. When I'm just writing a book at the moment about Akashic Record and the correlation between quantum physics, just to like put it into a little, like a simple book for people to read, just to understand the gravity based on research. It's not something that I'm making up, it's literally based on research, so that people can understand the actual concept of and the science behind the Akashic Record, because the Akashic Record is just basically our subconscious. You know, we're literally identifying issues that we're holding in our subconscious body, and that's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Our subconscious is not just our mind, you know, it's the whole. So we're looking at what we're holding in our subconscious, and our subconscious is literally held in the quantum. So, you know, we can actually tap into the energy of our ancestors through this quantum, and ultimately when we're sending healing, this is what we're doing. We're literally healing, you know, as you all know, you're all aware of it, we're healing, you know, their energy, and understanding that, recognizing that how our actions impact others, and how our actions can impact our present and our future, just as our past actions have impacted our present, which is basically karma, right? So, you know, it's really fascinating to go into the depth of what quantum entanglement is. Ultimately, we can release these entanglements through meditation. We can just close our eyes, we can just communicate with our higher self intelligence, and we can just ask our higher self intelligence to cut any unserving quantum entanglements with any other individuals in this lifetime or any other lifetime, and individuals that are living or departed in another time vector, and ask for these entanglements to be released for the highest good of ourselves, for the highest good of the other, with love, with grace, and with forgiveness and compassion. And these entanglements will be released if they are ready to be released. However, there may be much deeper work that is needed, because there may be karmic contracts that need to be resolved, which is what I'm finding in the, obviously when I'm doing readings for people, what karmic contracts need to be resolved, what contracts have we brought with us into this lifetime or into this current space-time that we need to heal. So some quantum entanglements, some attachments, because ultimately a quantum entanglement keeps us attached, it keeps part of our energy, just to summarize, and another person's energy, another individual's energy, again, whether it's a soul from another lifetime or whether it's an individual in this lifetime, it's keeping portions of our energy entangled and enmeshed. And that could be through a trauma bond, it could be that we've experienced trauma together. You know, the relationship could have been traumatic, so it's created an enmeshment. So there could be a trauma bond that needs working through, that needs healing for both parties. It could be a deep soul lesson that needs to be acknowledged. Otherwise, you know, our soul has chosen to work through this in order to grow and evolve. But it could also be that there's a deeper acknowledgement that's needed in order to understand the actual experience that each of the parties had in this, you know, within this relationship dynamic, in order for the attachment, the entanglement to be released. So yeah, some may need a little bit of a deeper work, but for sure you can, and we can create hundreds, we can have hundreds if not thousands of entanglements currently, which are literally, when you close your eyes and you scan your fields, you can just see them as hundreds or thousands of tiny threads or hooks into your auric shield, into your electromagnetic shield, or into your different energy centers. But you know, you can certainly go in and ask, communicate with your higher self, and just command, not ask, you're commanding, because your higher self is just you. So you're just asking, commanding with your higher self, working together with your higher self to release these entanglements that are no longer serving, that are ready to be released. and what is ready to be released will release, and anything else that needs to be worked through on a deeper level, then of course you can work on that with a deeper level, whether you work with somebody else or whether you have that ability to work with yourself. You just go into your Akashic record, the little video that I uploaded in the group on the channel, that you can find that, and you can just go into your Akashic record and you can ask, you know, higher self, show me what entanglements I may have that need to be addressed right now. And you could work on one per, you know, if you find out that, you know, that you've got 10, for example, then you can work on one entanglement per day or one per week, because ultimately it's important that you give yourself time to integrate the release, because there may be, quite often there is, an emotional release. But just know that when you are releasing these entanglements, that you're not just liberating yourself, you are liberating the other individual as well, whether it's a past life soul, or whether it is you know, a previous partner or a friend that you've got some unresolved issues with, somebody who meant a lot to you. As I said, we don't create these entanglements with just random strangers or people that we don't care about. We create them with people that mean something to us. So, you know, if there's something unresolved that you have, then you can resolve that in a meditation. You don't always need to communicate with the person in order to resolve it. You could literally just write a letter to that person, whether it's a parent, sibling, a lover, and you don't need to send that letter, but you can write it or type it out. You can email it to yourself and just write, you know, dear John, dear Emma, and just write that out, and, you know, whatever it is that you want to say to them. And ultimately it's about forgiving, and that doesn't mean to say that you're forgiving, you know, if somebody has treated you in a really bad way. It's ultimately you forgiving yourself, you know, you're liberating yourself, you're letting go of, you know, the energy behind the entanglement, because it's the energy behind the entanglement that's toxic when we're working with negative, you know, when we're clearing negative entanglements. It's toxic energy, it's draining us, it's keeping us stuck in negative loops, negative patterns, negative cycles. They interfere in our current relationships, again, whether that's a relationship with, like I said, a family member or a lover. You know, they interfere in our relationships. So it's, you know, it's really important that we clear them. And finally, we also have entanglements with our soul fractals. So I talked a little bit about in the last discourse with soul fragmentation, when I was talking a little bit about our soul fractals, and how we can also, of course, we have entanglements with our soul fractals because they are part of us. They are aspects of our soul experiencing realities in other time vectors, in other dimensions. And if these are all happening simultaneously, so if a soul fractal is experiencing some deep emotion or a trauma in another time vector, in another dimension, the emotion will leak down into our third dimensional reality, and we will feel that. I did talk a little bit about this in the soul fragmentation discourse. So we can absolutely feel the energy of a soul fractal because we are entangled with them. You know, they are us. It's just another aspect of our consciousness. So be aware when you have a sudden wave of pain, fear, terror, panic, just a sudden wave of anxiety comes over you. Just ask, is this mine now? Is this coming from me? And if you get a no, then ask, you know, is it from a fractal? Is it from one of my fractals? Is it from somebody that I have an entanglement with? And if you're not familiar with this work and you find that you can't do this work yourself, then reach out, because this is my field. This is what I do, and this is what I love doing and helping people with. And I've got a whole protocol for diving into the various entanglements that we have through timelines, through traumas, through soul attachments, through people directing negative energy towards us, to us directing energy towards other people, to curses, to spells, to vows, to organisations that we've been entangled with, all of it. Like, I literally go into all of this in my readings. But if you're familiar with the work and this is work that you can do yourself, then amazing, then do it yourself. It's, you know, we're all wise wisdom keepers and we all have this knowledge within us. We just need to we just need to embody it. We need to get out of our own way sometimes and like release the mental chatter to allow our higher self intelligence to communicate with us, because quite often we just lead such busy lives that we're not having the solitude that we need to communicate with our intelligence and receive the downloads of intelligence that our higher self is constantly communicating to us, or downloads of intelligence that we're actually receiving from from the higher power that is ultimately working through us and for us. So I think that is it. If there is anything that I've missed, I will post it in a comment under the video, because I wanted to keep this as short as I possibly could. We're already kind of 40 minutes in. I'll try and keep them as short as I can, but yeah, it's just so expansive and there's so many other aspects that I could go into, but I just want to try and keep it as short and sweet as possible. And also there's a lot of people here who are kind of just starting out on this journey, so I don't want to overwhelm people with too much. So yeah, let me know how you found this little discourse, and please share your experiences, questions, anything you want to collaborate with, anything you want to share, to expand upon, anything that I missed. Just comment under the video and I'll be more than happy to expand further. And I will, at some point, I will do another, probably in between Christmas and New Year, I'll do another meditation, because I like to try to do a weekly discourse and a weekly meditation. So I will, but obviously it's Christmas next week, so a lot of people will be busy, but I will try and do a little meditation at some point next week, maybe Friday or Saturday. And then ready to go in the new year with another discourse and some more exciting stuff that I've got up my sleeve ready for you all, which I'll share with you all later. But thank you for watching, and drop me a love, drop me a like, drop me a comment, and just let me know if you found this little insight helpful. And thank you for watching, and have a beautiful weekend. Thank you. Lots of love to you.